Greetings and salutations, dear viewers, and welcome back to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV. I'm finally catching up on the content of the latest patch 3.4, which brings me up to speed. And what that means is today we're tackling the most recently added extreme primal, the goddess, Sophia Extreme. I find this fight actually isn't that difficult. Sophia doesn't have a huge repertoire of different moves. It's mostly about how she chains them together and uses them in ways that make you have to dodge one in a particular way in order to also dodge another. However, it is still very easy to miss a cue or to miss something going on in the arena, and to get killed because you didn't see something coming. Once you're in the arena, one of the very first things you're going to want to do is mark all of the players for an attack that's going to be coming later on called Sin and Punishment. This attack requires all of the players pair up with one other player, so we mark players so we know exactly who we're marking up with and can spot them easily. As long as you match each DPS up with either a tank or a healer, everything should be fine, as no DPS should ever have to pair up with another DPS, nor should a tank ever have to pair up with a healer or another tank or a healer with a healer. So as usual, at the start of the fight, you've got a little bit of time to get some good DPS in. You don't have to worry nearly as much about stacking up behind the boss in this fight. It's a much more free-form fight, so feel free to run around to the sides to get those positionals in. Now, there are 3 moves that we're going to be seeing Sophia use throughout the course of the fight. Those are Thunder 2, Thunder 3, and Arrow 3. In order to see these coming, you mostly just have to look at her cast bar. So you see Thunder 2 coming. Thunder 2 is a large conal AoE in front of her. So as long as you're behind her, you're fine, and the tank should try to move around too. Shortly after this first spell is cast, you'll see the daughter appear off in one of the corners of the arena. You're going to want to run quite quickly right up to that thing's mouth, for reasons Xavier just noticed. The daughter will let out a scream, and this will send you flying away from her a pretty fair distance. You want to try to move diagonally away from her, and if you're lined a little bit too far in one direction or the other, you may go careening off the side of the arena. I'm not sure what move it is, but somebody's got a move that prevents knockback, and that saved all of us from getting knocked back that particular time. So with our tank down, things are going to get a little sketchy for a while, and shortly thereafter, you're going to hear Sophia say, "When one doth not suffice," at which point a few clones of her will appear around the edges of the arena. She'll then cast a spell. This time she's casting Thunder 3. Now Thunder 3, unlike Thunder 2, is going to be a large donut AoE, where the only safe spot is either being on the complete opposite corner of the arena, or standing within her hitbox. You'll also see a tether while this is going off, tethering to 2 of the clones that have appeared. Nothing is going to happen with them right away, but keep in mind which ones were tethered. She then casts Arrow 3, which is the only one you get a ground marker for, so you know, don't stand next to her. And while this is happening, you'll see 2 tethers going to the remaining 2 clones. So at this point, we've seen all 3 of her spells, now it's how she uses them. After a brief moment, she'll start casting Execute. When she finishes casting Execute, all 4 of the clones are going to cast the spell that she cast while tethered to them. This is going to turn most of the arena into a hot zone, but keep in mind where safe spots were, particularly the 2 clones that cast Thunder 3 have a safe spot directly underneath them, so remember where they were and run to them. The clones go away, and we're back to beating on Sophia for a time. Now, Sophia has 2 different tank busters. I'm not sure of their names, though if the log says anything, this one may be Arms of Wisdom. But its only real signifier that it's coming is this green glow around her. When it goes off, it hits the tank, and the tank gets hurt. A DPS will not survive through this. I've tried. It also puts a debuff on the tank that's hit by it. That's going to make it very hard for that tank to continue tanking. So usually right after it's done, the other tank will want to provoke the boss off of that tank and do a quick tank swap. So the first phase taught us a lot of various mechanics. And after a time, Sophia will disappear, reappear on one side of the arena where you can run up to her and get a couple free hits in as she casts Cloudy Heavens, which is going to completely change the arena around you. She'll put a shield up around herself and summon 3 adds, the first, second, and third Demiurge, bringing us into the add phase. One tank grabs the first Demiurge, one tank grabs the third Demiurge, and everybody piles onto the second Demiurge to kill it as fast as possible. A DPS will usually end up tanking this one, usually me. As long as it's killed quickly, this isn't that big a deal. Now, each of the Demiurges do have their own set of abilities, 2 or 3 attacks. The second Demiurge doesn't do a lot of note. However, as it nears 50% of its HP, it will start casting Divine Spark. This is kind of a Medusa-like AoE, as the eye on the ad will attest, and simply looking away as it goes off will avoid you any damage. Once it goes off, keep DPSing them down, and the second Demiurge should go down fairly quickly. Your kill order here is 2, 3, and then 1. 23 is number 1. With the second down, we move to the third. Pardon my temporary confusion. Now, the third Demiurge has 3 different moves at its disposal. The tank holding the third Demiurge is going to want to grab it and take it to one of the far corners of the arena, because it's the one that put down that large ice AoE in the corner. I believe it only does this once. Periodically, the third Demiurge is going to cast Gnostic Spear, which is simply a large directional AoE in front of it, which we saw while killing the second Demiurge. And then finally, as it approaches 50% of its HP, it has Gnostic Rant. This is a massive, very powerful AoE, and the only safe spot for it is directly behind the Demiurge. Once the third Demiurge is down, we finally move on to the first Demiurge, who has, to my knowledge, 2 abilities that you've got to watch out for. One of which you probably won't see much of, which is his Kenomas. There's the horizontal Kenoma and the vertical Kenoma, which act like Ravana's shields, making it so you can only damage him from the front or back, or you'll get some pretty nasty knockback. Usually by the time you get to this Demiurge, they've worn off and he doesn't cast it anymore. And then the final move that the first Demiurge has to concern yourselves with is Infusion. He's going to target one person with a powerful directional AoE. Some guides suggest taking everybody in the group and putting them into the middle to eat damage, and as long as all 8 people are between the Demiurge and the person actually targeted, well, 7 people, they shouldn't kill anybody and shouldn't do anything too horrible. However, anymore, the accepted strategy has become simply to sacrifice the person. Sometimes you have a better day than others. Once the person's hit with it, you'll hear Sophia say, "Even in death, there is no release." That person is going to be given a zombie status, where they're just going to wander around the arena and likely get themselves killed. So while that person is off getting themselves killed, everybody else finishes killing the first Demiurge, and then piles into the far corner of the arena. This is important that you are in this corner, because Sophia is going to tip the scales of the arena. And as long as you are standing on that one far side, you shouldn't go sliding off the far edge. She'll tip them back, bringing you back where you started, and hit everybody with a large raid-wide AoE. That would be her ultimate. Now that the ads are done, we're ready to fight Sophia once again. And now the scales are going to play a very important part of the rest of this fight. The primary new mechanic added in this final phase of the fight is the actual tipping of the scales. This typically comes whenever you see the tethers coming off of her to the two scales on either side of the arena. Most of the time, this will result in the scales being tipped. However, there are 2 points during the fight when they do not. And I'm sorry to say, I don't know of a good way to distinguish which one is going to be which. However, it is pattern-based, so it will always come at set intervals. This very first time, for example, being one of them. The scales will not tip this time. Instead, we're going to get a lot of proximity markers under all of us, which we place in that same corner of the arena, and then sprint to the far corner. Thunder 3 from the boss means we all run under her for safety. And then another Quasar, and this time the scales are going to be tipped. So here's the trick with the scales. You need to know which way the scales are going to tip, and how strongly the scales are going to tip. Quickly look at the tethers coming off of Sophia, and figure out what the difference between the two is. Here we can see there are 2 on one side of her and 1 on the other side, a difference of 1. 1 is an odd number, which means we're going for a short slide. Were it even, it would be a long slide. So now that we know it's going to be a short slide, we wait for the tethers to go away and actually look at one of the balances. Within it, you see 2 red beacons. There is also a blue beacon, and the scales will always tip towards the side with the blue beacon. Since I have not seen any blue beacons on this side, that means it's going to tip towards the other side, and I need to position myself over here for a short slide. I found the best way to do that is if you look at the squares in either corner of the arena, you want to line yourself up with the edge of the square. And that will slide you down right into the perfect position. Now, Sophia does have a couple other moves that she can do right after this first tip. However, if you've done enough damage to her, she will skip them, going directly into Thunder 2. So be very aware of what she's casting, and if it's Thunder 2, get the crap out of the way. Now this time we look at the tethers and we see 4 on one side, 2 on the other. A difference of 2, meaning this is even, and we're going for a long slide. I have never seen a difference of 3. However, I have seen a difference of 0, which as far as this is concerned is treated as an even. So we know we're going for a long slide, so we look off to one side. We again see no blue beacons. So that's the side we have to run to, and we have to prep for a long slide. Additionally, at this point, you'll see Sophia has disappeared and reappeared along one edge of the arena. She's about to dive bomb long ways across the arena, hitting everything in its way. So you not only want to be positioned for the slide, but also to not get hit by her. I was just a little slow, but you get the idea. I'll quickly add it's far best to tank Sophia in the center of the arena, so you can get to either side depending on where you have to be for the slides. And then comes Sin and Punishment. This is the move that we were all marked for. Half the party is marked with white circles, half the party is marked with black circles. The DPS are all going to be marked with 1, whereas the tanks and healers are all going to be marked with the other. These need to be cancelled out in order to not be killed, so go find your partner and stand over top of them. Once you see the equilibrium has been maintained, you can get back into position and continue DPSing, as Sophia will start using Sintamani, which is simply raid-wide damage. This first time she uses it, I believe it only hits twice, but every time we'll see it after this, it will be hit 3 times. Maybe more. Another Arms of Wisdom going out. hitting the tank, followed by a tank swap, and the clones appear again. Now this time when the clones appear, she will not immediately go into casting spells to tie to them. You'll instead get hit by another Sintamani first. So we start the tethers on Thunder 3, so keeping those two in mind as our safe spots if we stand directly on them. And then Arrow 3 going out to the remaining two, so we do not want to stand near them. So we know where our two safe spots are, but it's not quite that simple yet. Another Arms of Wisdom going out on the tank, and then comes the cast of Execute. So when Execute is started casting, you need to get into position. The daughter, however, has disappeared and reappeared on one side of the arena, and is going to cast a large directional AoE across one way. So you just need to pay attention to where she appears, and move to the other safe spot. Once the clones are done, it's always a nice time to be able to go back and get some DPS in. Sintamani partway through. Another Arms of Wisdom on the tank. And then finally another Quasar. We can quickly count a 4 and 2, so we're going for a long slide. Look off to one way, see no blue, so we need to get into position as far or close to the edge as possible. I will add you need to be right up against the edge. If you're in even a little bit, you will go off the edge. And the daughter decided to step in with another powerful directional AoE. With the long slide, you're guaranteed not to get hit by that, but it is something to be aware of had we gotten a short slide, that we need to be standing far enough in, which is why I line myself up with the side of that square, that we go past where the daughter's laser is going to be. Yet still not so far in that you go over the edge. And then quickly back to Sophia for a time, followed by some more Sintamanis, and another Arms of Wisdom on the tank. Thunder 2 is a directional AoE in front of us, so everybody moves away. Another Sin and Punishment, so pair up with your compatriot. You do not want to be standing too close to someone else during Sin and Punishment, or it may mismatch the pairs. And immediately after that Sin and Punishment, the daughter will appear again, and this time we again want to move right up next to her so we get blown back and not off the edge. Another Arms of Wisdom on the tank. Another Sin and Punishment that needs to be resolved, and while you're resolving that one, you'll see the lines appear again. I see 4 on one side, 3 on the other, so we're going for a short slide. I saw a blue beacon on that side, so I'm turning around and running back to the other, and getting in position for a short slide. You don't have to worry about Sophia's dive bomb or the daughter that time round. More Sintamani, Arms of Wisdom on the tank. We've seen her various clones appear, though she hasn't done anything yet to give them any abilities. So there we see Thunder 2 targeted on one clone, so keep that in mind. Up until now we've been using Thunder 3 as a safe spot, but Thunder 2 is also a safe spot if you hide behind that clone. Followed by an Arrow 3 on every other clone. Now we're not quite done yet, because I mentioned that there were 2 points throughout this fight that Sophia will put the proximity AoEs on all of you when doing the tethers instead of tilting the arena, and this is one of those times. So we're going to start by all stacking in one corner in order to bait those AoEs, and then we sprint across the arena. This corner had no clone in it, and here we should be able to avoid all of the various AoEs. For this, I would simply suggest following the crowd if you're not sure exactly how to handle it, because I've also run to this spot in order to bait, and then run behind the Thunder 2 clone in order to be safe from the oncoming attacks. And the tethers go out again. We see 3 and 3, that's a difference of 0, which as far as this is concerned is considered even. So we have to run to the far other side. I'm a little bit far away, so I used, very briefly, Fists of Wind to get me far enough. We didn't have to worry about Sophia's dive bomb, however the daughter did shoot her laser out. But it was a long slide, so that didn't really mean much. At this point, things should start looking familiar, because from here, she's beginning to loop back and cycle through her old moves. And she's going to go along this rotation twice over. At the end of the second time through this rotation, she'll cast Sin and Punishment yet again, only everyone will have a black circle. That's her hard enrage. As long as you can bring her down before then, though, that is Sophia Extreme. The DPS check isn't really that horrible as long as everybody doesn't die. But not dying does require a degree of awareness of what's going on in the arena around you, not simply looking at cast bars. But that's Sophia Extreme. Until next time, everyone.